So there's a question that comes up pretty often in this world, and that is the question of where do babies come from? And I remember when I was a little girl, I was probably about 4. I don't think I was in school yet. And my mother was pregnant with my little sister. And I'm sure that that's probably what occasioned the asking of the question, where do babies come from? And a 4-year-old, what do you tell a 4-year-old? Well, my mother told me, she said, well, God. God is where babies come from. And at the time I'm thinking, oh, well, okay, that makes a lot of sense, because I been to Sunday school and we prayed and my mother read us Bible stories, and so God seemed like the right answer. Now, that is the right answer to give, or it's a good answer anyway, to give to a 4-year-old. So let's say you're a college student and you're in a biology class. Well, now the question of where do babies come from is going to get a whole lot more technical. And the answer to that question isn't going to be God. It's going to be something else. So there are questions that are asked, and depending on someone's age or their background or the maturity, even where they're coming from, the reason why they're asking the question, the answer to the question is going to change. It's going to vary depending on who's asking the question. Also, the answer may vary depending on who's giving the answer. So if we were to change the question a little bit to something more like, why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my destiny? The answer to that question would be different depending on, who you are, the reasons why you're asking the question, and who you're asking it of. So for example, a scientist will give you a different answer than a philosopher. The reason for your existence, maybe it's the primordial soup, or if you're a philosopher, you'll, wax eloquent about, all kinds of things that philosophers talk about, which is not an area I know anything about. If you're the author of a romance novel, the answer to the question of why are you here would be very different than if you talk to a theologian. So depending on who you ask and the reason for the question, you're going to get different answers. And the answers may be more or less satisfying. But here's the thing. The person that's asking has something they want to know. And the person who's giving you an answer has a perspective that they're coming from. Okay? And everyone's perspective is going to be slightly different. And sometimes you might get too much information. People might give too much information to a 4-year-old, okay, and not enough information to a 12-year-old. Sometimes the information will be skewed or incorrect or romanticized or philosophized. Some answers are too technical, some are too precise, and some are too general. So why am I saying all this? I want to look at our story, the story of humanity, from God's perspective, not necessarily from a personal perspective, not from, our perspective of as humans, but from God's perspective, his vantage point. The questions that we ask are things like, why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my destiny? Is there a destiny? Is there a purpose? And these are questions that are answered in the Bible, and they're answered very well. And they're answered according to our ability to understand. So some of us in our spiritual walk are like 4 years old, and the answer, to where babies come from or why am I here, it's God. That's a good answer, and it's the right answer. But for people who have been walking with the Lord for a longer period of time and have more information, they're not just drinking milk anymore, they're actually eating solid food. The answer, that God is behind all this is, I don't want to say that it's not enough, but actually the Bible provides a much more meaty answer to those questions of why am I here, what's my purpose, and what's my destiny. And God is giving us in the Bible his perspective, his vantage point of this. Sometimes, in the scriptures, we read it from our vantage point, and certainly there are people who are communicating their heart and all of that in the Word of God. But in the very beginning, in the book of Genesis, God is telling us right away, right from the get-go, his perspective on why we're here, on who we are, what our purpose is, what our destiny is, and why we're here. So a lot of these things you wouldn't know out of first or second or third or even 10th reading of the Bible. Some of these things you only know because you've been over this path, over the story many, many, many times. And all of a sudden, we're starting to make some connections. And it's just like, the pioneers. And in some ways, I feel like a biblical pioneer here. I'm going places where other people don't go. Doesn't mean they're wrong or I'm wrong. It just means I'm going places where other people haven't been or haven't been for a while. So I feel like I'm getting my machete out and just hacking and slashing, doctrines of men to forge a path for other people so that they can understand some of these connections that have taken me like decades to arrive at. And the thing is, none of these things are hard, but there's been so much hacking and slashing of the undergrowth that I've had to do that that others hopefully will not have to do because I've already made a little path. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel over and over again. If someone has sort of cleared out the brush, it makes it easier for people who follow. So I think that's part of my job here, is clearing out some of the undergrowth and helping make the way a little clearer for other people who follow. And I understand that I'm still on the journey here, and there are things that I'm going to think about differently, perhaps in a year or less. And I understand that a lot of things that I present are very chewy and they are very dense and not easily swallowed. And I do come up against a lot of resistance, but a lot of times people have told me, people leave comments in the comments section, that at first they were either offended by something I said or they thought that I couldn't possibly be right. And then as time has gone on, they think about things a little bit more. They connect more scriptures themselves. They realize that, I'm not totally, off in the weeds somewhere, but there might be some validity to the things that I'm saying. So I just am saying this so that you will have an open mind and an open heart about a different perspective that I'm going to give you on some of these very familiar passages that are in the Bible. So one of the things that I've come to realize is that as people created in the image of God, we're here rather late on the scene. Okay, that there's been ages past where God, three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, have been in existence together, that the heavens and the earth were created probably a long time ago. And God created the angels before he created the earth. It talks about that in the book of Job. The morning stars all sang together when God created things. And everything was created good in the beginning, but somewhere along the line, Satan fell. He took some angels with him. It's not a third. Okay, anybody who reads Revelation 12, read it again. Satan did not take a third of the angels. He took some. We don't know how many. And there was this huge revolt against God. And this revolt has been continuing for a very long time. And it's been in existence since before Genesis 1, 2. Okay, when the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the earth, and God said, "Let there be light." Day one of basically our story. The story is very old, though, and it goes back a long time. And our part in it is just introduced here in Genesis 1, verse 2. And this is where God recreates or creates the earth that we live in now over the course of 7 days. And I think they were a literal 7 days that all of this was put back in order again. Except for we still have fallen angels. Those guys are still here. Those guys never went away, and they are a huge part of this story. And they are the part that we don't really talk about very much in church. We don't, well, mostly because, at least in Western churches, people don't even believe in the supernatural anymore, and they don't believe in the spiritual realm. And so a lot of the spiritual things are basically discounted. They're discounted. They're not incorporated into any kind of biblical narrative. Most churches are just about, loving your brother and living a good life and so on and so forth. It's worse than pablum. So it's a really, really long story. And I just want to tell you something, that this story, it's about us, but it's not primarily about us. In fact, we are involved in the epic conclusion of a very long battle that God has had against Satan and against the hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. Okay, we are at the end game of this very, very long story. And I've done a video series, a couple of them, one on the plan of God, and I would recommend that to you. And then there was another one that I did where I talked about ages. The Bible talks about ages past and that there are ages to come. And people have not always existed in all of these ages, but for many of them, Satan and the fallen ones have existed, and they have been a thorn in God's side for perhaps tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. We are late on the scene here. Humanity, created in God's image, we are latecomers to the story, and we are part of, I think, a mystery, that something Satan did not know. He was not made aware of the fact that God was going to create people in his image, okay, to be image bearers. This epic battle is won between God and his team and the forces of wickedness, Satan and his team. And this battle has been raging for eons and eons. And it's about to end. And even though we've only been around for about, 6,000 years, we're latecomers to this story, but we are part of the solution of how God is going to get victory over the enemy. And so we're actually part of the solution. We're part of the strategy for God taking out Satan. And we have a destiny and we have a role to play in this. And God is going to, through the church, cast down powers and principalities and rulers of darkness in the heavenly places. Okay, and God's goal is that we would replace all of these fallen ones. And it's a temporary placement because God has others that he's going to bring up after us to replace some of these positions that fallen angels hold right now. Now, a lot of us, I didn't have a very good understanding of the purpose of angels. I just thought they floated around and they worshiped God and they sang and they had harps and so on and so forth. I didn't understand about the angelic hierarchy. I didn't understand that angels were created to have dominion, that they have areas that they are stewards over. And I've done a number of videos on angels. It wasn't really till I started studying Revelation that I started seeing that there were these, an angel over fire, angel over water, angel of the altar, and then I started looking back at other places in the scriptures that talk about angels and principalities, and I started realizing that there are spiritual entities who have a stewardship over certain domains. And just because they have fallen doesn't mean that they've actually been removed from their positions. that they have a position that they still hold, even though they are fallen. So God's plan is that somehow or another, he knows how he's going to do this, that all of the fallen ones who currently hold positions of stewardship would be replaced. And he has to have spiritual replacements, and that's us. So right now there are two theaters of battle. One is in the heavenlies, and the other is here on earth. So there are, fallen angels, fallen entities who are in both places. They are in heaven. They have access to God, and they have to periodically give an account, according to Job chapter 1. Even Satan has to give an account of his what he's doing and his actions on earth, because remember, they're all stewards. They have a position of stewardship. They hold a position. They have a place. And eventually there's coming a day when there is no longer any place for Satan and his fallen angels in heaven. That is, they will no longer have a position. And Jesus is preparing a place for us. That is, we will have a position in his Father's house. So some of us will be replacing the fallen angels and the stewardships that they hold, and there will be other new positions that are created for other believers. But we have these two theaters of war, and the first battle that's going to be won is actually the one that's in the heavenlies, which is when God is going to, have Michael do this final battle where Michael and his angels will eventually prevail over Satan and his angels, and they'll be cast out permanently. But the reason they won't have a place anymore is because believers will have already been brought into the heavenly place. I mean, we will be there. There'll be enough of us, enough raptured and resurrected and martyred believers in heaven to hold or take over positions which will be forfeited basically by the fallen ones. This brings me to a place where I just want to say this. God's battle is not against people. Okay? God is not angry with people. Not to say that we don't do things that cause him to be angry, but his anger toward us is more like the anger that a parent has when a kid for the 5th time has done something they shouldn't do, and you get angry with them. It doesn't mean that you're going to war with them and now you're out to kill them, okay, or to do away with them. That's entirely different, and you're not taking them to court and having them thrown in jail. Okay, you're angry, but it's from a parental side that they need to be disciplined so they don't do this again. So it's disciplinarian. It's not that you are on an opposing side. And this is how God is with us. He's our Father. He is not angry with the human race. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And it's while we were yet sinners that Christ died for us. So God is sort of bending over backward here to tell us that we're not the problem. Okay, we're not the problem. We have a problem, but we're not the problem. And the big problem that he's dealing with right now is this infestation of fallen entities, and that they've entrenched themselves in positions of power, and they're not about to give up that position. And in some way, they know, they sort of they think anyway that they have God over a barrel, because if they're not there to hold this position and to do this job, who's going to do it? Okay, well, that's where we come on the scene, okay? And God creates man in his own image, and he gives us dominion over the earth. We read about that in Genesis chapter 1. We're created in his image. We are given dominion. That is, we have a stewardship, which is the earth. Okay, that is our stewardship. We've never relinquished it. The stewardship has never been taken away from us. Okay, we still have it. We're still in that position, even though we're fallen. Okay, and I know there are people out there who teach and believe that God took it away from us. He never did. Okay, this is a principle you need to think about. The stewardship of the fallen angels was never taken away either. Okay, now there are certain stewardships, and I think Satan is one of these, that he had a higher position in the hierarchy, and his stewardship was taken away from him. And I think that he was originally the steward of the earth. And I think he overstepped some boundaries, and when he did that, he was demoted and replaced by people. Okay, he was replaced by people because there is an earth and someone needs to be the steward of the earth. Now, people will go, well, why can't God do that? Well, in God's economy, this is how he's established it. This is how he wants it. Okay, this is how Jesus set these things up. And so these are rules that he has that he wants to keep in place. And so, of course he could change it, but he doesn't want to change it because this is how he's decided it should be. Satan's dominion was taken, dominion over the earth was taken from him. And I think that's what he wants back. He wants to get that officially back. Okay. And so that's what part of the end times scenario is about. And God is going to give Satan and the beast, his false son, enough rope to hang themselves with. And they will, for 42 months, Satan will be the dragon, the serpent, will be the equivalent of God the Father, who will glorify his fake son and give him his power, his throne, and his great authority so that the Antichrist can exercise the dominion that actually Christ is going to hold during the millennium. So that 42 month is basically Satan and the beast's version of the millennium. Okay, when they have full and complete control over the earth, and they're going to subdue the earth the way they see fit, have dominion the way they want to have dominion. And remember, the rules are that only a man can have dominion over the earth, and that's why the beast has the number of a man. It's why it's not AI. It has to be a person. Okay, it has to be a person. In Genesis chapter 1, we read that God created men and women, male and female. He made them in his image. He gave them a commission to be fruitful and multiply and to have dominion over the earth and to subdue it. And that little word subdue has recently been like a little thorn in my brain. What does that mean? In what way were, men and women, male and female, created in the image of God to subdue the earth? Okay, I thought everything was perfect. I thought everything was good. I thought everything was very good. What needed to be subdued? Okay, this is a question. And as far as I can see, as far as I can tell from what I've read in other places, the only thing that needed to be subdued was the fallen ones. They were the only ones who were here that were not good. Okay, and the fact that Satan could have access to Adam in the garden tells us that even though God made everything good, that there still was evil in the world. Evil still had access to the earth in the form of these fallen ones who wanted to, trip people up. Okay, so they're still here. And I think part of the reason for the millennium is for Christ as a man to subdue the earth, to subdue, well, and that's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, that he's going to have dominion until he's placed everything under his feet, so that ultimately this command of God for people to have dominion and subdue the earth will be fulfilled. And then it says that Christ will hand the kingdom to his Father. In Genesis 1, we learn the reason why we're here. We're here because we are given this stewardship. We're to have dominion. And because we're made in the image of God, and because we are spirit beings in an earthen, jar of clay, there's this spiritual dimension to our existence. And the stewardship that we have over the earth is not just a physical stewardship, it's also a spiritual stewardship. And this is where when the fallen entities come in, our stewardship is to protect the earth from those beings. And we have authority, we were given authority to do that in the very beginning because our stewardship was of the earth. We know the story, Adam ate from the tree that he was told not to eat from. And so sin entered the world, basically through us. And Satan then could exercise control of the earth through us. So that's the way Satan was going to sort of get the back door in of taking dominion over the earth, or retaking dominion, what he thought was rightfully his, through people. Okay, and that's how Satan is doing it right now. He uses people. It has to go indirectly because he can't overstep that boundary. Okay, and here's something else, just a reminder: angels have boundaries. Angels cannot overstep the boundaries. So even Michael didn't pronounce a railing accusation against Satan, but he said, "The Lord rebuke you." Why did Michael do that? Because if he had stepped in to judge Satan and say, "You're a bad guy, you can't, shouldn't do that, or don't do that," or whatever, he would be overstepping his boundary. He'd be putting himself in the position of a judge, and that isn't what he does. Okay, so every angel has a boundary. Every position has a boundary, and you're not to overstep the boundaries. So even Satan knows that he cannot overstep this boundary without having a problem. And we know that in Genesis chapter 6, the sons of God came into the daughters of men, saw that they were beautiful, and produced this race of earthborn giants, the Nephilim. They overstepped their boundaries. And Jude chapter 6 talks about angels who overstep their boundaries and how they're being kept in chains. Okay, they actually lost their positions. They're being kept in chains right now in the darkest, deepest part of I think it's Tartarus is what it's called. It's the deepest place of Hades, and they will be kept there until the fifth trumpet. Okay, and that's when they'll be released out to the earth. But anyway, you can't overstep your boundaries. And so Satan works through people to do what he wants to do, and he will still work through people, a person, when it comes to the end times. But here's the deal. The battle, the war, is not against people. God is not mad at humanity. His anger and his wrath is not against people. That's why Jesus died. God so loved the world. The battle is against powers and principalities and spiritual hosts of wickedness. And even Paul said, we're not battling against flesh and blood. Our war isn't against people. Okay, it's not against people. Our battle is against the spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. And it's through the church, Paul says in Ephesians, that God is actually going to claim the victory. It's through Christ and through the church. So I'd just like to read that passage in Ephesians 3, verse 9. "And to make all men see," this is Paul talking, he wants to make all men see what is the plan of the mystery hidden for ages in God who created all things, that through the church the manifold wisdom of God might now be made known to the principalities and powers in the heavenly places. This was according to the eternal purpose which he has realized in Christ Jesus our Lord. Okay, so the battle isn't against people, and God is actually, his plan is that to give humanity a role in this, in the deposing of thrones and powers and dominions and principalities. Okay, and he is going to do that, and he's going to be doing that through the church. So part of our role here as Elohim, Jesus said, you are gods. Okay, you are Elohim. You're given dominion. You have a spiritual stewardship as well as a physical stewardship over the earth. Okay, and that's part of what we've been given here. And I think that this time of training here on earth, which is what this is all about right now for believers, this is our period of training. This is our version of Adam in the garden walking with God in the cool of the day, being taught by the Lord. And what was God talking to Adam about? What was the Lord God, Jehovah, Yahweh, what was he talking to Adam about in the garden? Well, he was teaching him. Okay, you got to think of, what was Jesus doing with his disciples on the road to Emmaus? He was telling him about spiritual realities. He was, discipling him. He was training him. For what reason? So that he could enter into another level of glory. We go from glory to glory, okay? And we go from one stewardship to another. Even Jesus did this. He came here on earth. His primary stewardship, the first time around when he was here at his first coming, was to train 12 men and to die on the cross and rise from the dead. That was his stewardship, okay? And that's in his stewardship prayer in John chapter 17. Jesus says, I did what you asked me to do. He tells his Father, I did this. He gave an account of what he did. And when he comes back, his stewardship this next time is to take dominion over the whole earth and hand the kingdom back to his Father. Okay, that's what the role is. That's what his stewardship is. And as believers, we're going to enter into that with him. Okay, we will be glorified. That is, we will be given a position high up on the hierarchy, okay, a position within the divine community, right? So it's a high call that we've been called to. So that brings me to the next part that I want to talk about here, and that is that God chooses people. He chooses people to be his special, called out people. God does not choose everybody, but he does choose some, and he calls some. He calls them. And God is always calling people. And if we hear the call and we say, hey, choose me, then we become part of the chosen or the elect. Okay, that's the other word that the Bible uses to describe people who are chosen. They're the elect. And there are different chosen people in the Bible. Adam was chosen. Adam was chosen to have an intimate relationship with God in the Garden of Eden. He was chosen to be in God's home and be his son. Adam was chosen for that position. When people fell and mingling of angels with men, when that happened, creating the Nephilim, the giants, God was going to wipe it all out, and he chose another man. He chose Noah and his family. Then later, God chose Abram out of all the people on earth to be his friend. Okay, and through Abraham, God would send the Messiah. So Abraham's son Isaac was chosen, not Ishmael, it was Isaac. And Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob was chosen. And then Jacob had 12 sons. And out of those sons, eventually Joseph was chosen, given the double portion. And his sons Manasseh and Ephraim came into be a part of the 12 tribes. Levi didn't have an inheritance in the land, and so Ephraim and Manasseh would take over that. But then the messianic line would actually go through Judah, who was chosen. Okay, and then you keep on looking at how God operates. He chooses the nation of Israel out of all the nations in the world to be his chosen nation. Out of the nation of Israel, God chooses the firstborn to be his special people. And then later he chooses the tribe of Levi to be his priestly tribe in place of the firstborn. So you can see that God is continually calling out people from a larger group to belong to him in a special way. That's what it means to be chosen. It's what it means to be a Christian. It's what it means to be born again, is that you are chosen out of a larger group of humanity to be close to God, to be trained by him, and to eventually hold a position of honor in his family. The battle, friends, the end time battle is not about God being angry and judging fallen humanity or rebellious humanity. God does not have a problem with humanity as a whole. He loves people. He sent his son to die for people. This end time scenario, this is not about the wrath of God on people, okay, at all. The end times is how God is setting things up. He's giving Satan enough rope to hang himself. God is going to be bringing groups of people into heaven, not because we need to escape, okay, although it will be an escape. The purpose is to replace the fallen ones who are going to be out of a job. Satan thinks, and he has thought, that there is no way that the fallen ones can be replaced. Not until people came on the scene. And then once Jesus died and rose again, and now we are going to have the life of Christ inside of us, we're going to be glorified, which isn't about having a fancy body. It's about being put in a position, like a divine position, okay, a godlike position, and be able to take over positions that the fallen ones have had. Okay, Satan did not take that into account. He didn't know that that was going to be happening. Okay, God does not have a bone to pick with humanity. His bone to pick is with the fallen ones. So this idea that, the seals and the trumpets are all about God judging a fallen, wicked, rebellious humanity is totally out to lunch. If you read Revelation, let me suggest that you read Revelation in a different way. I suggest that you read it as a battle between the forces of darkness and evil, the fallen principalities and so on, and how the plan that God has for getting them out of their positions in heaven and bringing them to the earth, letting them do their thing here on earth until Christ returns. And then at the end of this tribulation time, before Jesus sets up his formal millennial reign, all of the fallen ones are going to be judged. This time period is not for the wrath of God on people. This is for the wrath of God on the fallen entities. So who are the fallen entities that will be here on earth during the end times? Well, it's every single one of them. Okay, every single one of them. By the time of the abomination of desolation, by the time of what people call the midpoint of Daniel, Satan will have been kicked out of heaven. All of his angels would be kicked out of heaven. They are never going back there. They are never giving an account of a stewardship again because they do not have one. Okay, they will no longer have one. They will be here on the earth, every single one of them. That has never happened in all of history, going back eons and eons and eons. That has never happened. This is brand new. And this is one of the reasons why things will be so bad here, is because every single fallen angel will be here on earth. And why people don't talk about that, I don't know. Everything is going to be so different here during the end times. It's not like we're talking about, things are going to be bad and all of that. We're talking about an infestation and an invasion of fallen entities. In addition, all of those fallen sons of God who sinned with human women earlier on, who are in the pit right now, they are going to be released onto the earth, and they do not like people. They have permission to torment people for 5 months. But people will not be able to die. And why are they tormenting people? Well, they want to take over the bodies. They want to take over the bodies of real people, because remember, you have to be a person to have dominion here. Okay, you have to be a person to have dominion. And they will try and seduce people, hoping to, kill them and take their body. But Jesus, who has the keys of death and Hades, is not going to allow these people to die. Because if they do die and then that spirit comes into them, then they will be damned forever. So he's not going to allow this to happen. So those entities will be on the earth doing their things, plus all the demons. Even during the days of Noah, there weren't any demons on the earth. There were giants, but they hadn't died yet, and their spirits hadn't gone out into the earth in the form of demons. Okay, and there are more demons now than there have ever been. This place is infested with them. And when Christ begins his millennial reign, his reign of peace, there will not be any demons in affecting people. There won't be any fallen angels doing anything here on earth. The only dark side or downside will be that there are people who will go into the millennium, people who survive that time of transition, who will still have a sin nature. And eventually, by the end of the 1,000 years, that sin nature will be a huge problem. And then once Satan is released, people who've been wanting to sin but couldn't sin because we're ruling with a rod of iron, so they're not allowed to do these things. Once that 1,000 years is over, Satan will be released, and he will try and overpower Christ and his kingdom. Okay, and who does he try to attack? Well, he tries to attack the beautiful city, which is where Jesus will be reigning from, and the camp of the saints, which is our little home. That's our campsite. It's not where we live. We actually live in the New Jerusalem in heaven, which will eventually come down to earth. And even still, though, Satan has to work through a man, through Gog. Okay, Gog is a leader. That final Gog-Magog war. It's going to be an attempted war, but they will not triumph. Lightning will come down from heaven, and Satan and his forces will be destroyed. So the big problem here is, for right now anyway, is the battle plan is that God is going to consolidate all of the fallen ones here on earth so that they can be dealt with at Christ's return. This is the judgment of the fallen entities, all of them except for Satan and then death and Hades. But even death and Hades have to cooperate with Christ because he has the keys. He has the keys. He has control over them. They have to do what he tells them to do. Okay, and this is one of the reasons why the beast can be killed and rise from the dead. It's not that Satan has power to resurrect him. It's that Christ allows this. He's got the keys, and he says, I won't let that guy out again. And so he will rise from the dead. So I've done a video on death will not be normal during the end times, and that is a video you might want to check out. I've got other videos that I've done on the plan of God and on ages past and all of this, and there's a lot of videos that I've done in the past. But the big thing that I want to mention here is that our creation is in the context. Okay, that is people being created in the image of God and being given dominion on earth is created within the context of this very large story. And it's how God is going to get victory over the fallen ones. Okay, and we're a part of that story because we're the replacements. Temporary replacements until the end of the millennium. That's when the people whose capital is that beautiful city, that is the nation of Israel, the people of Israel who will never rebel again. Remember, by the time Christ returns, the problem of Israel's rebellion will be over. That's what it says in Daniel chapter 9:24. Israel's rebellion will be officially over. Okay, and this is how we know we're not at the end of the 70th week yet, because at the end of the 70th week, Israel will never rebel against God again. During the whole millennium, they will never rebel against God, and they will be the last ones there with the beautiful city and the camp of the saints who will remain loyal to the Lord. And that is what then qualifies them to be our replacements. So they will move into that position of sons with God's name on their foreheads, seated in God's presence, while we as believers get our fine linen garments bright and pure, and we become the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And that's when everybody gets invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. That's the story, okay? And I think I just need to keep telling the story because it's not one that's being told. And go over to Amazon and check out my new book, Convergence. Right now it's available in Kindle. We're working on getting it in a paperback version as well. So that's a very dense book, okay? It's very dense. It's not very long, but there is a lot of information crammed inside of that book. So hope you'll pick that up. So leave a comment in the comment section and we'll see you on another video. Till then, have a blessed day.